All right. Hey, good evening. Chris Greenfield with the Common Grounds podcast tonight. How's everybody doing out there in quarantined America? So, tonight I'm going to just go ahead and apologize right quick off the bat. If we have any technical issues tonight on the show, there's a lot of people on the internet that's not usually on the internet all the time right now. With everybody being at home, uh, streaming, doing different things, the internet connection can at times break up. And so I apologize for any lag or any video issues that we have tonight with the sound quality or anything. So, but tonight I have on Dutch Hendricks from Rube's Good Brain Coffee. Dutch has been in the coffee industry for a long time. He has seen the true third wave of coffee come to fruition. He's just launched his own coffee brand. We're going to get to know him more over the next hour. So tune in, YouTube, Facebook Live, Common Grounds Podcast, brought to you by Roasters Marketplace. All right. Hey, good evening, Dutch. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Did I say your last name right earlier when Dutch Hendricks or Hendrick?
Well, it's Hedrick.
Hedrick.
Hedrick. Yes.
Hedrick. Okay. Just want to make sure. So yeah, I kind of introduced you just a little bit on the intro here to the show. Why don't you go ahead and tell my listeners and my viewers out there a little bit about you, where you're from, and how you got into coffee.
Well, I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina originally, and I got into coffee essentially because my dad would have me making him coffee. He was a real coffee lover, and I just grew up doing that and learned an appreciation of it. And when I started college, which was, late 80s, early 90s, I got a job at a place called Cup of Joe in Raleigh. And this was 1993, and I just got it as a summer job. And up till now, I hadn't even heard of Starbucks because they weren't all over the country like they were now. But this seemed like a nice place to go and study. And when I went down to sit down, I heard about cappuccinos. I sat down at the bar and ordered my first cappuccino. And I took one sip and I realized, oh, this is why people drink coffee to begin with. It's just not a caffeine rush or anything like that. This is actually what really good coffee tastes like. A couple of years later, this was 1993, I needed to get a summer job. And I try not to work where I eat usually, but I knew that they paid more than what I was used to, which was $5.50 back then. So things have changed. So I went to work there as a dishwasher just for the summer, and I fell in love with it so much. I fell in love with the pace and the coffee, and I just ended up wanting to do that for a living. So that's what I've done since then.
And how'd you go ahead?
Go ahead.
How'd you transfer from, you were a barista for a while, right? How'd you transfer from making the coffee to roasting the coffee? Tell us about that transition.
Well, after a few years, another place opened up called Global Village, and unlike Cup of Joe, they didn't roast their own beans. They bought beans from Counterculture Coffee back then. They don't anymore, but that's fine. So they were getting beans from Counterculture, and my boss, Mike, said to me, I know you love coffee and you want to do this for a living, but there's only so much you can do working as a barista. So he wanted me to, he sent me there for cupping. This was in 2002. And then he said I should see if I can get a job roasting coffee. I never talked to him about it. He knew how much I love coffee, and I kind of felt that this was his way of getting me into the roasting end, so that I would be roasting his coffee and not just make drinks. So I'm not sure if that's the case, but I always suspected that. And then I went to Joe Van Gogh, where I was reunited with one of my first bosses from Cup of Joe, and he started ordering from Joe Van Gogh as well. So anyway, for a while, essentially about 15 years, I was roasting coffee, and it's just something I love. Never really wanted to do anything else. So,
what's the biggest roaster that you've ran on?
There's a roaster called Aurora that is a one bag roaster, so we would roast 132 pounds in it at once. So, and I would do that. There was one guy who I would take turns with. So every once in a while he would roast, then the next day I would roast, and we would do that. I remember one day, for some reason, I think he hurt his ankle, but I ended up doing all the roasting for a few days, and I ended up doing around 39 roasts a day for about a week or so, because I was running 2 roasters at once. So that was fun, actually.
Yeah, that's a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
How much, like how much coffee do you think you've roasted? Just a couple million pounds, you think?
I wouldn't even be able to guess. If you go by, I don't know, I was at Counterculture, like I said, about 18 roasts on one roaster, a bag at a time, and then I roasted on a half bag roaster at Joe Van Gogh, and so and that was for about 11 years I did that. So you can do the math, I guess.
Yeah, a lot. That's a lot of coffee, man. That's a lot. Now, Joe Van Gogh, is that a pretty regional coffee brand there? I've never. Is that just East Coast kind of?
Yes. Yeah, they like I said, when my old boss, Robbie Roberts, when he split the business of Joe with he started opening his own coffee shops. And around when I left Counterculture, he was just getting into focusing more on wholesale and not just on shops. So I jumped in around that level, and we actually sold more and more coffee to the point where we were in essentially all the Whole Foods in the southeastern region. So they're not as big as Counterculture, but I think they've got a really good reputation in the southeast, and I believe it's probably going to grow some. So
Awesome. So I just posted invited everybody to ask any questions if they had them. But when you transitioned into coffee in the early 90s, where would you think the third wave of coffee was? Was that just the beginning of it? Of what they call third wave coffee?
Yeah. I would say that essentially when I was at Cup of Joe, and even when I was with Joe Van Gogh in the early days, they were essentially doing what I would call late second wave roasting. They would still roast things to second crack. And to be honest, I believe that Counterculture was doing that as well when I was roasting there. So things changed a lot since I've been roasting even. Now, what I would say that third wave coffee was back then was essentially getting really, really good beans, sourcing really good beans, communicating with farmers as much as possible so that there's more high quality grain available. And they were still trying to roast as light as possible rather than doing everything as dark as the West Coast roasters would do. So there's one day I remember I came. Well, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of a trade magazine called Roast Magazine. They started up in late 2004, and we started getting some of the early issues of it. And I would read the articles as much as possible. And there was this man named Willem Boot, and he started out an article saying, if no one in the world bought dark roast anymore, would you be able to handle it as a business? And I found it really interesting, this idea that you really didn't have to roast everything that dark in order to get that really good quality coffee. And I tried to communicate it with the other people I worked with. And you know how people are. I mean, it's kind of, they want to do what they're doing. And so at one point I had a situation where I was doing 2 Costa Ricas, a full bag of each. And so I did one the way we usually do it, then I did the other the way Boot suggested it. And everyone chose the second roast over the first roast. So I probably shouldn't have done that, frankly, because I just did it and thought, well, if it's bad, then we'll just do, off and then we'll go back to what we were normally doing. But whenever we started doing that, all our Agtron numbers went up about 3 points. Now the Agtron measures the roast level, and so by going up, that essentially means that they got lighter. So we were immediately roasting coffee lighter than we had been. So I kind of feel that, as far as counterculture goes, I feel that that may have been the first step towards what we think of third wave these days.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, when I interact with people who are like I was a few months ago before I really started getting into coffee, everybody's like, well, it's got to be dark. It's got to be dark. I can remember going to the store and looking at the bins and picking the darkest bean that was up there, thinking, oh, that's the good one. I'm going to get the good one. And I'm not saying it's bad, but the flavors you can get out of a really nice light or a really nice medium even are way more complex, way more palatable than you can ever get out of something that's a brick of charcoal.
And you're gonna
go ahead. Sorry. No, after you.
Okay, well, I was just going to say you're going to turn down the bitterness because you're not roasting it so dark, and you're going to let some of the unique flavors of each bean shine through, and that to me is what's most exciting. Now, I can understand that a lot of people gravitate towards French roast because to them that's something distinctive. I mean, it's pretty obvious. And so for a lot of novices, they're going to gravitate towards something that's new. And that's understandable because, I mean, we all look for novel experiences. However, maybe rather than going for something dark, maybe try out something like an Ethiopia, which has all these wild fruity flavors. And it's not necessarily roasted as dark as the French roast would be. So, I mean, that's really what opened my eyes up. Because when I went to the counterculture copying in 2002, before I started working there, I remember tasting Ethiopia for the first time and really thinking, oh, wow, this is pretty wild. And there's something empowering about that too, that you don't have to be what most people would think of as an expert taster, because I didn't think of myself as an expert. I thought, I still don't, frankly. I thought of myself as someone who was experienced, but I didn't experience things on that level. I think that all people really need to do is to be exposed to that, to really appreciate it. So, and that's one of the things that I'm really excited about doing, because I mean, I feel that the more we build a bridge to people who haven't tried specialty coffee before, the more they will realize, hey, there's something to it. It's not just a bunch of coffee snobs who
Yeah.
are going around sipping coffee and looking down on everyone else. So
Yeah. I definitely, and we were talking about this before the show, before the show kicked on how we were talking about one aspect of this, but I can't tell you the last time I bought and I'm going to equate a dark roast coffee to a pretty generic beer. So let's talk. I can't tell you the last time I had a Bud Light. Like I really don't.
yeah,
I'm sure it happened, but I don't know when. I mean, the last,
yeah,
I've got some really good
yeah,
microbrew from a local brewery downstairs right now. 11 Below, actually, if they're give them a shout out here. But and that's been
sure,
like that for years. And I never thought about doing it with coffee. I didn't think about it until, I got turned
yeah,
on to the specialty coffee. And now I'm just like, oh man, I'm going to do this, or, now I'll go through, and I actually found, before this whole, if you're listening to this show later on down the road, we're right in the middle of the COVID-19 quarantine in 2020. If you're listening to this years later or something, but I went out and bought a
yeah,
big bag of Rube, which is they're a roaster out of Austin, and I went through, and because they're the only ones that had like 3 kilo bags of coffee at the store. And I went through and I moved like 15 of them, and I found one that's expiration date was like February 21 or 2021. So next year. Okay. So that means that was
wow,
probably roasted 3 weeks ago, right? I mean, that was, if they're stamping a
yeah,
year out on it, then that was the
yeah,
freshest bag that I could find from them. And it's okay.
yeah.
I mean, it's strong, and it's definitely, it said medium roast, but it's a pretty dark roast, but it's still better than what a lot of people drink. But they're
Yeah,
just not turned on to it.
and there are a lot of people out there who love dark roasts, and I think that's fine. Um, I certainly, I'm not going to argue with anyone's tastes. Um, so and we offer a darker roast to people who might enjoy that. Um, However, I think, and frankly, one of the things that concerns me is I kind of feel that things have in third wave coffee have almost swung to the other extreme, to where everything is way too light, to the point where they're a bit too sour, and that kind of worries me too, um, because I think you have to develop the coffee enough to be able to get the flavors out of it. So so that worries me too, because if someone who's into dark roast tries one of those coffees, they may think, well, what's the
Oh
big
yeah.
deal about this? So, um,
Yeah.
but uh, those coffees are harder to brew too, I think. So that's why if someone's getting into specialty coffee, I'm not necessarily going to push them to the lightest roast they can get, because the beans tend to be harder, therefore less soluble, and you have to worry about extraction more. So maybe a good specialty light or medium, or somewhere medium dark might be a good
Yeah.
starting point. Then you can work your way from there.
And that's one thing that I've kind of learned on the my roaster's choice. So the monthly program, it'll roll around to you here in a couple of months. But the roaster's choice program, we send out, uh, a different coffee from a different roaster every month. And I've kept them from my choice to a little bit on the medium to medium dark side. That way, if somebody's ordering it for the first time, they don't get something that they're not, that's shocking. You know, I'd rather have somebody order a
Yeah.
breakfast blend or a medium off my website for the first one, than something that might be a little bit like a really light roasted Tanzanian pea berry that's really, really grapefruity might not be what they're looking
Yeah.
for in their coffee, you know. Definitely.
Yeah.
Uh, when are you sourcing their from a local? How do you source your beans, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, at the moment, I'm actually working with some of my old employers. Um, so that way, I guess they're helping me out to get started because I mean we're still on good terms and everything. So, which is good because I know their coffees pretty well, and I can take them and I can roast them however I want, really at this point. And there's not a crossover too because I'll get things that they may put in blends, and so I can offer something, and I'm not really competing with them directly.
Yeah.
And frankly, there may come a point where if our business gets big enough, then one of the nice things about having a good relationship with other roasters is that you can chip in with them in order to buy pallets of coffee or lots or whatever, and therefore you can increase your buying power essentially. So you're not having to buy all this coffee that you may not need. You could split the pallet with other roasters, and therefore you're getting a lot better quality, but you're not having to spend as much as if you're trying to do everything on your own. So
On the sites for 2021 for Roasters Marketplace, I'm telling you, as we continue to grow, that is definitely something I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to do, is start leveraging uh, our network internally there to get us some stuff.
yeah,
So that's really cool that you can work, that you still have a good relationship in the coffee industry, and that's what I've seen from interaction with other roasters is, you know, since coffee's so big and everybody drinks it, there doesn't seem to be a super cutthroat mentality.
yeah,
Is that a good observation?
yeah. I would agree with that. Yes, because well, a lot of us are in things like SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association of America, or well, they're part of the Roasters Guild, which is also run by the SCA. And so we end up seeing each other quite a lot whenever we go to Roasters Guild retreats and or SCAs. It's hard for me to remember to say SCA rather than SCAA because that's changed recently. So if I
Yeah.
stumble, then that's why. But you're going to see these people quite a bit, and you're going to cross paths often. So it really helps to have good relationships with everyone, and it really helps everyone if the whole market for specialty coffee grows, because if everyone can increase the pie, as it were, then we don't necessarily have to be fighting each other over the pie. So the more
Yeah.
customers we have who are drinking specialty coffee, the better business is for everyone else. So I guess we can all focus on telling people about specialty coffee and how good it is, and we can all work together to do that. So that helps everyone out.
So when we get back, we'll kind of focus more on Rubes. So tell us how you came up with the
Sure.
name, and tell us a little bit about your company and when you got started for the company. That is.
Okay. Okay. Well, the name Rubes. The thing is about the name Rube. is I've actually had a fascination with that name for a long time. I remember there was an envelope with Bloom County characters on it. I'm not sure if you guys remember Bloom County, but there are a couple of characters, and these were for greeting cards. And on the envelope, one of them says, "What a Rube," and the other says, "Look it up." Because I don't think too many people at this time knew what Rube meant. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess I don't know what it means. So I looked it up, and it's someone who tends not to be as is seen as not as bright, I guess. And so that's always been a fascination of mine, that that was actually a fairly common name. And around when I was roasting at Counterculture, I was watching a show called Dead Like Me. I'm not sure if you remember it. It only ran for a couple of seasons, but Matty Patinkin played a character named Rube. And his character was actually the wisest one of them all, even though his name was Rube. And I always thought that was something of an interesting, I guess, paradox, or it's counterintuitive. So
I had to look that one up.
Always had this fascination with, yes, with the name Rube. And I remember when my daughter was 1 year old, she had a little toy husky, and she said, "He's rude." I think she said he's rude, but she could barely talk. And I said, "What? He's rude, Rube?" And so she named him Rube. And so essentially the name has evolved over all this time. And one time, my wife and I were playing a game where we were trying to figure out, or guess, we're trying to give each other all sorts of band names that start with a certain letter. We came up with B, and I was just kidding around. And I said Badfinger, and I just went on a roll with things that start with bad. So Bad Brains was one of them, and my daughter had no idea what we were doing. She just said, "How about Rube's Good Brain?" And I just, I thought that was funny, but I took it, and here's something that I probably haven't told you. I had a background in improv comedy years ago in the 90s. And one of the things I've always liked to do is take something that makes no sense whatsoever and justify it, figure out a reason why that makes sense. And so when I needed to name the company, I just called it Rube's Good Brain Coffee. And I thought, I'll figure out what that means later on. And I think it really fits now that I think of it, because I'm trying to reach out to people, let them know about specialty coffee. And there are a lot of people who may think, well, these people aren't really interested in specialty coffee. And I'm thinking, no, I think they're a lot more smart than you think. And I feel a bit of a commonality with them, I suppose. So I don't want to look my nose down at people or turn it up. And I want to help build a bridge to specialty coffee, and let everyone know that, hey, you don't have to be an expert taster. I don't even think that would necessarily help you taste coffee better, because all that really means is you're more sensitive at tasting certain things, but that doesn't mean you're really better. So if I have more of a sensitivity to sour coffees or whatever, I may not like that. Or if I have more of a sensitivity to bitter coffees, I may shy away from those. But no one's really wrong. It's just that we both have things that our palates are more sensitive to. And the main thing is that we need to be able to talk to each other and communicate, so that even if our palates are different, we can have a common language. So if you like bitter coffees, or that's probably, we don't like to say bitter, but if you tend to like that, then maybe I can offer something to you that you would like, and I don't have to tell you, hey, drink this because I like it, because I might like coffees that are more sour or sweet. So
Right. And that was
Anyway,
I think you addressed somebody's. Talk to me about acidity. Can you talk to me about acidity and coffee? Because you always see people talk about low acid coffee, or this is low acid coffee, or use it as like a marketing tool to sell coffee that a certain roast is low acid. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I keep on seeing different things.
yeah, I mean, there's a certain portion of the market that tends to look for low acidity coffee, and I think they say because there's they suffer from acid reflux, and so that's what they're looking for, and so they will look for French roast or something from Sumatra or Indonesia or something like that. I'm not really I'm not really convinced that it's the acidity of the coffee that causes that. I mean, it might have something to do with, but I tend to be skeptical. So until I see studies which say that, I'm not necessarily convinced. So anyway, for some reason, people will shy away from acidic coffees. However, I think that um, there's a lot of confusion, and it's hard to communicate that there's a lot of flavor to be found in acidity.
Right.
And for instance, orange juice and blueberries and any sort of fruit are acidic, and that's where a lot of sweetness is to be found as well. So there's one place I used to work that they would market a coffee as bright if it was higher in acidity, but if it were a darker or more of an Indonesian coffee, they would market it as low acidity. So they were essentially trying to speak to two different groups. So if you liked bright coffees and you liked sweet coffees, then the word acidity wouldn't put you off. Um, and vice versa. If you don't like that, then you can look for low acidity, and
Yeah.
and that would be your selling point. But it troubles me that the word acidity even has a bad reputation to begin with, because no one thinks that fruits are bad for you necessarily, and a lot of people drink soda pop, and those are actually a much higher in acidity than coffee is. Coffee's a lot lower. So
The and people
I'm
don't
not sure if
understand
that
some.
answers your question, but
No, that's exactly what I wanted you to talk about, was the acidity in coffee. Because when we're talking about food, because I mean, I guess food, beverage, whatever you want, you consume it and you taste it, and if you're able to choose what you eat, you know you're choosing what you prefer. And usually when you talk about uh, let's talk about what's something like sweet and sour pork. Okay. So you've got the savory aspect of it, you got the meaty aspect of it, you've got the sour aspect of it, uh, and you've got the sweet aspect of it. You've got all these flavors into it. And part of that sourness, part of that crispness of it is the acidity. And if you've depending on where you're getting
yes,
it from and the recipe, you've got the pineapple that might be in the sweet and sour pork. I like pineapple in my sweet and sour pork, and it has a very bright, crisp acidity to pineapple, but you wouldn't necessarily associate pineapple and ripe pineapple with a sour flavor. I mean,
yes,
pineapple's not really
yeah,
sour, but it is high in
yes,
acidity. You know, uh,
yes,
and
and there
everybody's.
are there are.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that there are lots of different types of acidity. It can be described many different ways. You can say it's tangy, you can say it's sweet, you can say it's mild, you can say it's sharp. Piquant, I think, is one description that you hear every once in a while. And only sour is an acidity that has a negative connotation to it. So out of this wide range of what falls under acidic, um, there's only a very narrow range that is essentially negative. So it's just, I think that's our job as roasters, is to communicate to people that, yeah, you may have a negative connotation association with the word acidity, but hang on a bit, just, open your mind up and give it a try, and you'll see that this is actually something that you may enjoy. Maybe not, but at least you've tried it. So
Yeah. And I really like the roasters and the trend that I've seen. And it might not be a trend. It might be just something I noticed, because I haven't been in specialty coffee long enough to notice new trends at all. But I really like when I look at a label and it tells me, most of them will say like 3 tasting notes. I really, really like the ones that are something that's really relatable. Graham cracker, marshmallow, chocolate.
Yeah.
Hey, that one tastes like a s'more. I know that might taste like a s'more, but
Yes.
the ones that are more complicated and less likely for somebody to know what it is, I think actually turns off people. I don't know what a stone fruit tastes like. I don't bergamot.
Yeah.
Man, that's in my cologne. It's like bergamot. I don't even know what that. So I think that's one thing that I would like to do on my website as I do this and as I taste coffees, to be able to go back in and sit back and be like, all right, here's the roaster's flavor profile. Here's Chris's flavor profile. Here's the normal. Hey, when I taste this, I taste rye. Most people, I would think most people know what rye tastes like. I would hope anyway. Or graham cracker or grapefruit or whatever, blueberry. The more prominent flavors, I think that is stuff that we need to encourage, especially to newer people into specialty coffee.
Yeah. One of the things I like to do is I will also try to encompass several different flavors in one descriptor. The first coffee I did was from Colombia, and when I roasted it really at a light level, I was getting a bit of caramel, I was getting some pineapple, I was getting some sweetness, and I just described it as, well, it's like an upside down pineapple cake.
Yeah.
And so you can put a lot of things into just one descriptor. And I try not to overwhelm the customer with a whole lot of descriptors, because they're not going to be able to relate to all of that to begin with. So if you just have your 3 most prominent descriptors and leave it at that, then you're more likely going to generate some interest, I think.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, and I need to write up a little blog post on it, is what I need to do, on, that they're not flavorings that we're adding to the coffee, that it's flavors that somebody perceives, and how we perceive flavor is because it registers to us in our mind as something. I've talked about this before with a roaster. Whoever came up with fake grape flavor has no idea what grapes taste like. That purple, it's not purple. That fake grape, when we get into stuff. And so we're not actually flavoring the coffees. But anyway, that's a whole nother tangent I can get on. I see a couple things behind you. You've got your Rube's Good Brain coffee cup. What's the brewer on top? What do you got going on there?
Well, I got a V60 up there.
Okay.
And right now it has a little brew basket that I bought for about $3. And right next to that, you'll see a measuring cup. And the whole reason why the measuring cup is there is because I was doing things in the V60, and I had an old Molita pot that I had for years, and I accidentally broke it. And I had no way of making coffee at that point, because the French press you see back there, I just recently bought. So I had to figure out a way to make coffee and didn't want to invest in a brewer right away. So I essentially started making James Hoffman's French press method, and I was doing it in the measuring cup. So what James Hoffman, I mean, if you ever watch his video, he's showing a method of doing a French press where you don't actually press it at all. And my screensaver's come up, so if the light changes, that's why. But and what's ingenious about his method is it's essentially how people in the coffee business cup coffee, which is coffee tasting. I think I mentioned it before. Mm-hmm. And so when you're cupping, you just put a few grams of coffee in a little cup, pour hot water onto it, and you let this crust form at the top, and you leave it for 4 minutes while it brews. And then at 4 minutes, you take a spoon and you break the crust, and that breaks the brewing cycle. And all the particles ideally will sink to the bottom. And then you just take off from the top the foam and stuff. It's kind of a scummy, bitter foam. Just take that off, and then you sip what's left. And that's essentially what James Hoffman's French press technique is. So I just figured, well, I don't have a French press. I'll just do it in a measuring cup. I'll do it like I'm cupping coffee. And I just, skim that off at the top. And the reason why I bought that little mesh filter that's in the V60 there is because there's still a little bit of sediment that gets in the bottom. So I just use that to strain it out, and you get a really nice clean cup of coffee. And, you don't really need $100 machine or whatever to do it. And that's one thing that's really important to me. I believe, I don't know, maybe it's because I don't have a lot of money to begin with, but I feel that there are a lot of people who are buying cheaper coffees because they don't want to spend a lot of money on it. And, it's fair enough, but I feel that if we can communicate ways that we don't have to spend a lot of money to get into the specialty coffee field, get into the game, then, that's a way of reaching out to people and getting them interested in something that they otherwise would, let pass them by. So, yeah, just a little plastic measuring cup, a little $3 filter, and all you need is a kettle and a gram scale. A lot of people have a kettle sitting on their stove anyway. A lot of people have, kitchen scales. I mean, kitchen scale will run you about $20 for a pretty decent one. And all you need is a stopwatch. Who doesn't have a stopwatch anymore?
Yeah.
So it should be really easy to get into specialty coffee.
You can get one of my scales that I have. I think I paid $14 for it, and it's a coffee scale. I mean, it's got a timer built in on it, nice big buttons, a rubber mat that goes on it. It works really well. And my coffee game went from okay to fantastic every time as soon as I started weighing everything. Yes. Every time I can put out, it might take me a cup or two to dial a new coffee in, maybe grind size, and it's usually grind size that I have to play with. But every time it's just, and then every time you brew it, it's to almost the same exact line in the cup, depending on the bean, and how much it actually absorbs on water. But I think that coffee scale.
Yeah. And that helps, because I mean, if you're just trying to get into specialty coffee, you can be in a world of confusion if you don't know what you're doing from one brew to the next. And what the scale really does is it takes out all of the doubt that you might have, because if especially if you're using volumetric measurements to weigh water, water's pretty heavy, and just a few drops here or there can really throw you off. So I mean, it's just, it's a device to clear away the fog and help you know what you're doing from one brew to the next. So, I mean, I've been doing it so long that I forget that people don't do it anymore. So when I start doing Rubes on my own, it really it was a bit of a culture shock to realize that there are people who are clutching on to volumetric measurements and don't want to let go of it. And I don't think that coffee companies that use 2 scoops on their bag, they're not really helping, unfortunately. But you know, hopefully, I mean, I've seen a lot of improvement over 25 years, and I just kind of realized, because I'm also a big fan of studying coffee roasting history, and I see big leaps from, if you study between 1853 or something like that, and then you go 25 years ahead of that, there are huge leaps of development. And I feel that that's the way it is all the time with specialty coffee. So, I mean, 25 years from now, we might be blown away by how much we've advanced since today. So.
Yeah, they've done some the or Texas A&M's doing some really, I think it's Texas A&M is doing some really interesting stuff with hydroponically grown coffee in greenhouses. And I'm not saying that that's the next wave of the future, but it is definitely an interesting thing that they're doing. But as the climate changes,
yeah, I mean,
and
early on, when essentially I was working at Cup of Joe in a barista, and I was very stubborn because I thought this is the way to do it, and this is the best way, and why are we going to do anything else? And it took me a couple of years to really realize, hey, there are other people who are trying different things, and you really need to keep an open mind. I mean, it reminds me of the medical field, how doctors have to keep studying constantly on the latest techniques and things, and not all of them are good, and some of them are good ideas that are just not thought all the way through. I remember the V60 when that first came out. There were a lot of people who, I mean, just really struggled with it. And I know we did. And at a certain point, we just kind of wrote it off as kind of a goofy coffee maker. And we stuck with Melitas and other techniques. The clever was one of my favorite. But here, years and years later, I see a video of James Hoffman using a V60, and I thought, oh, okay, that looks like it might work. So I give it a try, and it's my favorite coffee. So,
yeah.
I bounce back and forth as to what my favorite type of brewer is. And a lot of it depends on what my purpose for drinking the coffee is.
Yeah.
So if I'm just trying to taste it and evaluate it, and I don't want any doubt as far as whether the brewing technique might alter the flavor of the coffee, I might just use a French press and do it that way. But if I want to bring out more clarity, then I might use a V60 or something like that. But I mean, I could talk about brewers for quite a while, so
we need to just have a show. Yeah, we need to just have a show dedicated to brewing techniques one of these days. It's such a it's a preference every morning, and I've said this before, multiple shows. Every morning I get up, I would make a French press for my wife and a V60 for me, and that's just what we like. And I can do way more coffee for her in the French press because I got a nice sized one, and that's what she likes. And when she was going to work, she was able to take just a little bit of coffee with her in a thermos and have some more coffee at work. I just got recently, I should have brought it up here for the show, I've got an origami, and it's just such a really pretty pour over, and it makes a really good cup of coffee. It brews a little faster than a V60 because it's got a really big open bottom, and it's got so many channels that are going down. So I had to alter my grind size a little bit, but I can't get more. I can't do 40 grams of coffee in it. There's no way you can brew 40. So, because if I want to make this cup, little Roasters Marketplace plug here, if I want to brew 20 ounces of coffee, I can't do it in that brewer. It's not big enough. I just can't get the amount of coffee I need.
Yes.
So the V60 is perfect size, but it's a pretty brewer. And then I've been using the AeroPress with a fellow attachment on it that gives it's close to espresso style shot, but not quite there yet. Still working on that one. But there's just so many ways that you can brew, and so many coffees that it's an amazing world out there. If anybody wants to get into it, just hit me or Dutch up, and we'll gladly talk about it for a couple hours, if not days, on coffee.
Yeah. Well, one way, since we're talking about ease of use, I think that especially for people who are just getting specialty coffee, if you get something that's less fussy, that's an advantage. And I wouldn't want them to go onto the V60 and start worrying about slurries right off the bat. So there's this thing called a Gabby Drip Master A, and it's a brilliant little brewer. If you got a second, I can grab it real quick.
I know you're good. I'll pull one up. I'll grab it.
Quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So
Gabby Pour Master.
And what's nice about it? Drip Master.
I got it. Okay, I'm going to share the screen so everybody can see what we're talking about here.
Sure. Yeah, and actually the guy who invented this actually, go ahead.
Is that it?
I haven't. Oh, okay, perfect. That's it. And the guy who invented it, he's from Korea, South Korea, and he came into our shop at Joe Van Gogh one day. I guess he was just going to different roasters and telling people about it, and I guess hoping that we would buy some to sell to our customers. And it's a brilliant little device. Up top, you see a chamber that you pour the water in up there, and it will drip down in a little tiny stream into the next chamber, where it will essentially build up pressure. And at a certain point, it will start dripping down through the shower head. And it perfectly does a little pre-infusion so that you get your bloom phase going. And so the way it's made is they say to use a 10-to-1 ratio, which sounds strong, but you have to remember that they tend to drink smaller cups of coffee than we do.
Right.
So they would drink half as much, and the inventor couldn't really speak English very well, but we were trying to figure out, well, how could we get people who drink more coffee, like Americans, to want to buy this? And I took one home and I started playing with it, and it's simple actually. You just take it, put in the grounds you normally would for 1 cup. So I'll put 20 grounds in there. I usually do a 16.6 ratio of water to coffee. So what I'll do is I'll just fill it up twice. And so I'll fill up that top portion up to 167 grams of water, and it'll drip for 2 minutes, just about exactly 2 minutes. And then when that phase goes through, I'll do it again. And so 4 minutes, you don't have to worry about contact time. You don't have to worry about slurries or anything else. You just got to find a good filter that fits it, and that's pretty much it. And I mean, I love it. It's $35, so it's not too expensive. And I don't know what else to say. I mean, if I'm just using cup bring 1 cup for myself, it's incredibly simple. So,
I think one of the best investments I've
I
made.
can't imagine the thought that went into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
That's
just saying I can't imagine the thought that went into that.
yeah. It's
Just it's
definitely
so simple but so ingenious.
yeah. It's who would have thought that is a very interesting design. I'm going to have to put one of those in my cart and definitely play with one because it looks pretty cool. I'll put a link in the
Yeah,
comments to that for everybody
yeah,
here. I'm actually going to do that right now,
cool.
so I can pop it
Yeah, I
up
feel
there
it
right now.
simplifies things so much. I mean, you're never going to see it in a brewers competition or anything like that because it's just too
Oh
easy.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
But
yeah, I mean, I
that's pretty
still
cool.
love that. I love the V60, but when I want to do something that I don't have to think about, and I can just put water in it, go do something for 2 minutes, try not to forget about it, come back and do it again, and it's a good way not to slow down your day. So,
Yeah, yeah. Because
and
there's a lot of times
that's
I
another big
walk off.
thing that a lot of people.
There's a lot
Yes.
of times I
Well, I was
walk
just
off
saying
in the
that's
middle of a
another
brew.
thing that. Yes, exactly. And one of the big things that people, from being on in these coffee groups on Facebook, I see a lot of people don't like to invest too much time. I mean, that's why the Keurig is so popular, right? And it makes
Yeah,
such a substandard coffee, to be frank. But the only reason why people are doing it is for the convenience.
yeah.
So let's try to bridge that gap, make things a little more convenient, so that people are more open to trying it out.
Even putting. So I think I've got a Cuisinart. I don't know even know how to say it. Coffee
Yes.
pot, and it's plugged in. It doesn't get used. It hasn't been probably used in weeks. But if I was having to get up really early and have to get out the door, I would grind my beans the night before, measure out my water, measure out my coffee, and set it
Yeah.
and get up and go.
Yeah, and that's
But
fun. Yeah.
I don't at this point in where I'm at in my work schedule, and a lot of people around the country are working from home for the first time. Uh,
Yes.
you've got it. You might have a few more minutes, and now would be the perfect time to get a pour over and to figure out,
Yeah.
I can get a pour over with my kettle going and go in, turn it on, brush my teeth, wash my face, do what I need to do, go back in, my kettle's hot, grind. I can have coffee ready in 6 minutes. Easy,
Yeah.
if the water's already ready.
Yes.
And that's measuring everything out and doing the pour over. Even less time if I'm doing a French press.
Yeah.
French press, you'd give me 4.5 minutes and I'm on it, and it's done. But
Yeah.
I think a
Yeah. A
lot of
lot of it
people,
is. I feel that. Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel that a lot of it is there's this sort of static inertia, to use the metaphor, of getting going and actually doing it. So I think that people tend to be kind of intimidated a lot. I know, the V60 used to intimidate me for years. And I would just say, oh, I'm just going to roast coffee and let you guys handle it, and I'll try it. But, now that I'm doing my own thing, um, I can open my mind up a bit, and I have a lot more time to devote to that and learning different brewing techniques. But a lot of people don't have that luxury. But if you find the time and you're able to just put a little effort into it, it's really not as intimidating as it might be first off. So you just got to get into a routine, get some objective measurements like a scale and that sort of thing. And, I mean, boiling water is pretty standard, so you don't have to worry about that. Just when it stops boiling, then
yeah,
you're good to go. So don't worry
yep,
about the thermometer. And that's all you need. Just get in there and do it. So yeah, I mean, you got to do it, and you got to do it consistently. And so it does take a little detail-oriented, mindset, but not too much, not as much as people might think. So
Well, Rube, tell us Dutch, where can we find you locally there in Fayetteville?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm actually Fayetteville was where I was born. I live in
Oh,
Kittrell, North Carolina. Um,
okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
that's fine. No, that's fine. Yeah, right now, we since that bookstore closed down, we're pretty much doing everything online these days, which is fine with me because I believe that ordering direct is the best way to get coffee as fresh as you can get it, and we do everything uh, pretty fast as far as our turnaround. So anyway, our website is rubescoffee.wixsite, WIXSITE.com/rubescoffee. And if you go there, then if you click onto the button that says Fresh Coffee Now, that will take you and you'll find our selection there.
And you're also available on roastersmarketplace.com now. As of
That's right.
I
That's
think
right.
Wednesday we've got you up there, one of our 16 roasters, man. And I really appreciate, I think we talked back right after Christmas was our first conversation. And I appreciate
Yes.
you sticking with me and jumping on board here as we roll into this new spring and this new country of quarantine. And hopefully here in a couple of weeks
Yes.
this is all done. And I appreciate you jumping on tonight with me, and looking forward to trying some of your coffee here in a few weeks.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been fun. And I'm
Definitely.
really glad you're out there and you're.
Thank you very much. And I'll hit you up after I roll these credits. Everybody who tuned in tonight, thanks for watching. You can visit us on roastersmarketplace.com. You can find us on Facebook at Roasters Marketplace. You can also find the Common Grounds podcast on our website or on any of your favorite podcast players. And tune in on Tuesday night or Monday night at 6 p.m. for the Common Grounds podcast. We're going to be talking to the team from Active Self-Protection and listening to what goes on behind the scenes of a YouTube channel that has over 1 million followers. So we're really excited to have those guys on Monday night. So Dutch, once again, thanks for coming on, and I'll talk to you again here in just a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.